In a move shaking up Washington and Wall Street, Mexico and Canada have announced a $120 billion trade corridor, an economic superhighway designed to connect their economies directly, bypassing the United States. This isn't just infrastructure. It's a strategic response to looming U.S. tariffs, signaling a major realignment in North American trade. Imagine modern ports, high-speed rail, and dedicated trucking routes linking Mexico's factories to Canada's resources without touching U.S. soil. Construction is already underway, aiming to create a seamless flow of goods, from Mexican electronics to Canadian lumber, all shielded from U.S. trade policy swings. For decades, North American trade was a three-way partnership. Now, two partners are forging a new path, leaving the U.S. on the sidelines. The timing is no accident. With a USMCA review and talk of new tariffs looming, Mexico and Canada are building their own insurance policy. This corridor is a declaration of economic independence, challenging the idea that all North American trade must pass through the U.S. The global implications are huge. This could become a model for other regions seeking to insulate themselves from geopolitical shocks. As protectionism rises and supply chains shift, new alliances are forming. The Mexico-Canada corridor could be a blueprint for others, forcing the U.S. to reconsider its confrontational trade stance. In a world where allies are building ways to work around America, can the U.S. afford to keep escalating trade tensions? The answer will shape the continent and the global economy for decades. The stakes have never been higher. For over 30 years, North American trade was defined by integration, starting with NAFTA in 1994, which eliminated most tariffs between the US, Canada, and Mexico. This created a seamless market. Auto parts, produce, and products flowed freely, with supply chains crossing borders multiple times. But this era of cooperation began to fracture in the late 2010s, as new US tariffs on steel and other goods created uncertainty. The result? NAFTA was replaced by the USMCA in 2020, keeping some free trade elements but adding complexity and instability. The threat of renewed protectionism, like sweeping new tariffs, has left Canadian and Mexican leaders anxious. With over 80% of Mexico's exports and 75% of Canada's going to the US, any disruption is an existential threat. The corridor is a direct response to this vulnerability, born from years of growing unease. Leaders in Ottawa and Mexico City realized relying on a single, unpredictable partner was too risky. The new corridor isn't just a reaction to one policy, it's the culmination of a decade of shifting trust and the need for new options. The old North American Trade Pact can no longer be taken for granted. So what is the $120 billion trade corridor? It's a multimodal logistics network moving goods between Mexico and Canada efficiently and without US involvement. Deep water ports like Manzanillo and Vancouver are being expanded for direct maritime shipping between the two countries. Modernized rail lines and highways will move containers from ports to industrial centers, bypassing US customs and tariffs. In Mexico, new rail links connect to manufacturing hubs. In Canada, they tie into the national network, reaching major cities. Dedicated trucking lanes and a unified digital platform will track shipments, streamline customs, and optimize traffic. Experts predict the corridor could divert up to 30% of north-south trade away from the US, a massive shift. For businesses, it means faster, more predictable shipping and less exposure to US trade policy swings. The corridor is more than concrete. It's a digital AI-powered system designed for speed and certainty. It's not just an alternative, it's a competitive advantage. The Canada-Mexico corridor is already sending shockwaves through the US economy, especially in border states like Texas, Arizona, and Michigan. Cities like Laredo, Texas, once trade powerhouses, face job losses as traffic and revenue shift away. Economists warn that every $1 billion of diverted trade could cost thousands of American jobs in logistics and warehousing. States like Michigan could lose up to 25,000 jobs as auto parts and goods bypass traditional US routes. Local economies dependent on cross-border trade risk a downward spiral as customs fees, fuel sales, and tax revenues dry up. US manufacturers may lose their competitive edge as Canadian and Mexican firms ship directly and more cheaply. American businesses face tough choices: lower prices, relocate, or risk losing customers to the new corridor. The corridor is redrawing the map of North American industry, leaving some US communities behind. The economic engine that powered these regions is sputtering. The consequences are real and growing. The Mexico-Canada corridor has ignited a political firestorm in Washington. Some lawmakers demand retaliation, seeing the project as economic aggression. Others blame US protectionism for pushing allies away. One camp calls for new tariffs and barriers, risking a trade war. The other urges diplomacy and a reset of North American relations. For Canada and Mexico, the challenge is to advance the corridor while managing a tense relationship with the US. They must balance domestic interests with the risk of provoking their powerful neighbor. Every move, tariffs, negotiations, or new infrastructure, reshapes the continental chessboard. The upcoming USMCA review in 2026 will be a test. Can the three-nation partnership survive, or are we headed for rival economic blocs? The stakes are high, and the outcome will define the future of North American trade. The next moves will be critical. To grasp the corridor's impact, listen to those on the front lines. Dr. Elena Rios, a trade economist, calls it the most significant challenge to US economic dominance in a century. She says Canada and Mexico are building a new system, not just a bypass, because US political volatility is now a bigger risk than a $120 billion investment. Ricardo Vargas, a logistics manager in Monterrey, says, "For years we've been held hostage by tariff threats. Now we can promise Canadian customers stable prices and delivery, no more border drama." For Mexican and Canadian businesses, the corridor means stability and a future they can plan for. But for US workers, the mood is grim. Dave Miller, a veteran truck driver, worries. "If parts move by ship and train, what happens to my job? What about the truck stops and mechanics who depend on this traffic?" Union leaders warn, "This is a direct threat to good American jobs. We need investment in US infrastructure, not just political games." The corridor is a lifeline for some, a threat for others. For many American workers, it's an existential crisis. The voices are clear. This is more than business, it's about livelihoods. The divide is growing, the stakes are personal. Beyond economics and politics, this is a human story. In border towns like Windsor and Detroit, families and friendships have spanned the US-Canada line for generations. The new corridor threatens to unravel these cross-border ties, replacing daily connections with distant, formal relationships. In Mexico, the project is a source of pride and opportunity, creating jobs and keeping young talent at home. It's fueling optimism and building a new skilled middle class. But in American border communities, anxiety is rising. Economic decline could trigger social decay, lost jobs, falling property values, and shrinking public services. The feeling of being left behind may deepen political divides. The corridor also changes cultural exchange. Decades of three-way flow of ideas, food, and music may fade, replaced by a tighter Canada-Mexico bond. The continent's social fabric is being rewoven, and the long-term effects are still unknown. The story is about more than trade, it's about identity. As the corridor opens, North America faces a crossroads. One path, a diplomatic breakthrough, with the US embracing cooperation and a stronger, more resilient supply chain. Another, escalation, tariffs, retaliation, and a fractured continent with three competing economic zones. The most likely? Prolonged adjustment, as the corridor gradually siphons trade and American communities adapt, some thriving, others struggling. The US may shift focus to domestic and East-West trade, while Canada and Mexico deepen their partnership. The choices made now, cooperation or confrontation, will shape the continent's future. The US is no longer the only game in town. How Washington responds will determine if North America prospers together or drifts apart. The stakes are enormous. The next chapter is being written now. The world is watching. This isn't just a business story. It's about your wallet and your job. The price of groceries, cars, and everyday goods could change as the trade system shifts. If you work in logistics, manufacturing, or agriculture, your job could be at risk, or you could see new opportunities depending on where you live. The corridor is redrawing the employment map of North America. As consumers and citizens, our choices matter. Do we support local jobs, demand cooperation, or back protectionism? The debate over this corridor is about the kind of society we want. In a connected world, decisions in Ottawa or Mexico City can impact families in Arizona. Understanding the stakes is the first step to navigating this new reality.